Hello everyone. This is R. Suresh Kumar, working as Assistant Professor in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Dundigal, Hyderabad. That is I'm working here since 6 years. So that is my brief introduction. So my topic is regarding the hydrology and water resource engineering. From this one, the topic which is today's discuss about the hydrology and precipitation and forms of the precipitation and types of the precipitation will be discussed the today's topic. So for this one, very beginning of that. So before going to this one, what is meant by hydrology? Hydrology is science which deals with the movements and occurrence availability of the water of the source. So that is a study of it is forms, different type of the forms can also form like rain, snow, and is also mixed in that one. That is the hydrology. We studied about the different type of sources of the forms and the availability of the forms. We will also take it as the hydrology will be studied in this course. Next, the scope of the hydrology. So in the scope of the hydrology, water is one is the of course we know what is very important, vital of the humans as well as the nature. So without water we cannot, development is no more. So very necessity things. So since the necessity things, how we have to be acquired, how we have to be stored, and we have to be utilized of the different type how sources and can be implemented whenever we are going to be required, will all can be studied in this one in this course. So again, the hydrology can be bifurcated into two types. The first one is scientific hydrology and second one is engineering hydrology. First one is scientific hydrology and second one is engineering. What is meant by scientific hydrology? A study which is concerned with academic aspects is called scientific hydrology. The study means the study regarding the academic, what we are studying, what we are already giving the data, analyze and research data can be studied in the scientific hydrology, which is led in the classrooms. So in the engineering hydrology means what we learn can be implemented in the outside the world, real world. So what we acquire the knowledge in the classrooms can be implemented, can be outside the, that is called engineering hydrology. So in the engineering hydrology, so study concerned with engineering applications, ideas with study in the hydrological cycle and study of the problems such as the floods, droughts and strategies and combat them. So combined of this one can be studied of the hydrology. Next. So main hydrology of the can be bifurcated into two types: surface hydrology and groundwater hydrology. So surface water hydrology means the precipitation or rainfall can be availability and storage and utilization can be studied regarding the surface water hydrology. But whereas the groundwater hydrology is the movement availability in the through the wells or whatever it is, the availability in the ground of the inner layers for acquiring the water can be studied, just like aquifers, confined, unconfined aquifers. There is some layers can be store of the water in inner layers studied regarding the groundwater hydrology. Next is applications of the hydrology. So in the applications of the hydrology, where it can be applicable, so maximum probable occur in the given and frequency, and the water yield from the basin occurrence, availability, quantity and frequency of the water. Next, groundwater development. So where the groundwater can be implemented for the future and also for our drinking purpose, irrigation purpose, like there are some of the purposes you have to store some of the groundwater. Nowadays there is a lot of revolution can be comes from the storage of the groundwater. Next, there is methods of various methods for the flood forecasting, flood control can be also applications of the hydrology. Next, selection of the suitable sites for the dams, reservoirs and hydrological power generations. So of course, the storage water can be utilized various purposes. So just like the irrigation purposes or also power generation. So we call it as multi-purpose reservoirs, and it can be used only for irrigation reservoirs, and also used for power generation, also used for the multi-purpose reservoirs we call it as. Next, the capacity of the reservoirs can be also where you have to reservoir can be constructed, availability of the precipitation on certain catchment area is also very important. Next, interaction of the floods, waves and hydraulic structures like leaves and reservoirs and barriers and bridges and culverts. They are all hydraulic structures can be constructed based on the applications of the hydrology only. Applications of the hydrology. Next, what is the use of the hydrology? So, before we have studied about the where you have the applicable of the hydrology. But here, the uses of the hydrology is hydrology used maximum probable of the flood forecasting. Floods can be availability and construction of the dams and dam sites. So, various type of the water storage and catchments can be used for calculation of the hydrology. Next, engineering hydrology can be find out the relationship between the catchment and surface as well as the groundwater. That is a very important point. The availability of the rainfall in the some catchment area. So, how can utilizing the grass? Well, I have studied about the groundwater and also as from infiltration and precipitation and infiltration, the water can be stored in the groundwater, can be also percolation. The water can be stored from top layers to in groundwater can be storage. So that is the engineering hydrology. Next, expected floods, unexpected floods and spillways and pathways, highway culverts and urban storage drainage and can be known from the subject can be learned. Next, it helps to require reservoir capacity. So, whenever you have to store up the water, how much the storage capacity of the reservoir can be constructed by using some of the hydrological data which we are studied in the next topics. So, how you have to acquire the data, where you have to acquire the data of the hydrological as well as precipitation and geological different type of the conditions will also apply for calculating the reservoir estimations and irrigation purposes also where you are how much the water required from uncertain catchment area can be influenced of the region which crop can be selected for as per the requirement availability of the water. So, and also municipal water supply. This is also domestic purposes where you have to living and urban areas, and also drought conditions will be also be next applications also. It sells the hydrological hardware we call it rain gauges. In the rain gauges, in the application of this, as I told, the rain gauges can be calculating the precipitations, different type of the regarding type rain gauges and non-regarding type of rain gauges is also there. They were calculating the precipitations or rainfall. There is also flood forecasting, need for real-time flood forecasting can be estimated. Next, design operations of the hydraulic structures also used for protection, spillways, highway culverts and urban storage of the drainage. Next, it can be used for the reservoir capacity required and adequate water irrigation, municipal water supply during the drought period. And also the hydrology indispensable tools of the planning for the hydraulic structures and hydrological used for city water supply. As I told, the municipal water supply, urban area as well as rural area also, some of the area, drought area, you have to supply the drinking water purposes. Become storage capacity, dry period and runoff evaporation and evapotranspiration all can be constructed. And not only that, the dam constructions, reservoir capacity sizes, water pipelines, where how much the water required for estimation of the on particular town or village or urban areas can be known. Now, it can be also going to useful for the hydrology structures and hydrology based on the data. So, before going to be, we have to discuss up to this hydrology applications and useful can be already studied up to discussion. Next, precipitations. Actual, what is meant by precipitation? Actual precipitation. Precipitation is the process occurs when the water particles in the fall from the atmosphere and reaches of the ground is called as precipitation. So the process means whenever the water particles in the availability and the atmosphere can be falls down of the different type of the forms, it can be falls down. We call it as a precipitation through the atmosphere to reach the ground. Next, precipitation may be fall into the water bodies and other ground as also plain ground, streams and penetrate into the soil also. Next, forms of the precipitation. In the precipitation, we study different type of reaches the ground in the atmospheric conditions are also studied. But next, forms of how the precipitation can be forms different types. So for this one, there is some guidelines is there. Drizzle. The first one is drizzle precipitation. So drizzle means it is the sprinkle of the rainfall is less than 0.5 mm and the intensity less than 1.5 mm per hour. Intensity 1.5 mm per hour is called as drizzle type. We call it as drizzle. Next, rain. Rain we can consider it as the precipitation is more than 0.5 mm and less than 6 mm. We call it as the droplet of the rainfall. 0.5 mm to 6 mm is droplet of the rainfall which is reaches of the ground. We call it as rain. And the glaze. What is meant by glaze? This is a rain or drizzle comes into contact in cold conditions, cold water, cold air. The ground reaches 0 degrees centigrade when water droplets can be before going to falls to the ground. It can be freezed. So ice coating is also called glaze. Ice coating is also called it as glaze. Next is so actually the availability of the water as we see from that one. So where the actual availability of the water is from the oceans 97.25% is availability and ice caps and glaciers are 2.0%. Groundwater is 0.68, lakes is equal to 0.01 and soil moisture is equal to 0.05 and atmosphere is equal to 0.001 and streams and rivers 0.0001 percentage. Unfortunately, the soil, lakes and soil moisture, atmosphere, streams and rivers, the availability is very less, 0.001 percentage availability. Now, it means that the groundwater, the availability of the water can be decreasing. How it can be affected in the human beings, living organisms. Next, hydrological cycle. So, hydrological cycle can be hydrological cycle also we call it as hydrological cycle can be used for the continuous process of the runoff and next rainfall, evaporation, condensation and also the evapotranspiration and radiation and again it can be false just like a rainfall precipitation. The continuous process of the evaporation, transpiration, evapotranspiration and it can be continuously comes from the clouds to the as the rainfall. The process is continuous. We call it as hydrological cycle. We call it as hydrological cycle. So let us see the pic for that one. So the water is available to some surface runoff water availability of the ground can be First evaporated next come the precipitation and condensation and transpiration from the leaves and plants, and excavation from the oceans, lakes, streams can be also be evaporated water can be again it can becomes just like a precipitation availability. So that is a continuous process. We call it as hydrological cycle. The continuous process is called. Let us see that one in the flow diagram is the of the hydrological cycle is transpiration, evaporation. Of course, as we discussed, precipitation, interception, surface storage, soil water, and channel storage, and groundwater storage, base flow, runoff. Of course, these are all the forms which is the available according to the availability of the precipitation can be different type of the forms can be availability. Next, as this is also one of the types of precipitation, snow. The water vapor that directly change into ice is also called snow. Next, hail. Hail is the surely precipitated in the term of size more than 80 mm. We call it as hail. Next, dew. Dew is a form directly from the condensation groundwater during the night when surface has been cooled out in the radiation. This is also forms of the precipitation. Next, forms of precipitation, as you know, rainfall, hail, drizzle, glaze, sleet, rain, dew. These are the type of the precipitation as already discussed. And also this is the peak which is availability in the we acquired. The clarity was given of the precipitation of the precipitations. Next, hydrological cycle already. So this is the hydrological cycle. The evaporation, transpiration, and evapotranspiration will be also discussed. So next here, we discussed about the hydrological cycle. Different type of the different type of the parts can be seen, but as we know about the definitions of the evaporation, transpiration, condensation, infiltration, and precipitation, percolation, and also runoff, storage. These are some of the parts of the hydrological cycle. So let us see that one. What is meant by evaporation? Evaporation occurs when changes of the liquid state to gaseous state. Of course, everybody knows when we are studying from childhood. So evaporation from the liquid state to gaseous state of some certain temperature, we call it as evaporation. Next, condensation. Condensation is the process which the water vapor changes into the water. Water vapor changes into the water. We call it as condensation. So, once the water vapor in the atmosphere can be changes into dew or fog or clouds may be forms. That is the one of formation of the condensation. This condensation takes place in the cooling of the air. So, means the water vapor atmosphere water vapor can be conversion into the water as forms of the precipitation or rainfall. You have to come cooling atmosphere is required. So cooling atmosphere will be where the clouds will be availability can be, then the cooling clouds can be forms of the precipitation, and it can be forms like a rainfall. Next, interception. So what is meant by interception? Interception is the process of the interrupting the movement of the water in the chain transportation events leading the streams is called as interception. Next, precipitation, as already discussed. Next, infiltration. Infiltration is nothing but the physical process. So the water availability in the ground level, as you know, the availability of the process involving the movement and the water through the boundary area atmosphere interfaces with the soil. So we call it as infiltrated. Infiltrated, the water is availability in the above ground level. First of all, this is the layers of the ground. The top of the layer, the rainfall or precipitation comes like that. So first the top of the layer can be wet. So the absorb the precipitation can be top of the layer, and again slowly it can be comes into the ground layers. Slowly comes into the ground layers. We call as infiltration. So that is called infiltration. So the topmost, which is first wet, and storage some of the water, again it can be used, comes into the underground layers, we call it as infiltration. Next, percolation. So very important. So percolation means here the availability of the ground, as I told, so in the top of the rainfall is there. Rainfall comes into the ground by tangent, gravitational and capillary. Due to the capillary forces, the water can be stored in the underground. Is called it as percolation. That the main difference between the infiltration and percolation is, infiltration means the above water first wet and can be slowly comes into the ground. But here the percolation is the movement of the water through the soil, movement of the soil from the capillary forces. All groundwater origins are subsurface. Subsurface water can be, as I told you before, we studied about the groundwater storage can be studied from this. Next, transpiration. So very important definition, transpiration. Transpiration is nothing but the water is which can be evaporated or which can be evaporated from the plants and leaves, which is stored inside the plants, and above the plant, which is from the precipitation levels, the water is evaporated from the plants. We called it as transpiration. So evaporation, as we know, the liquid state to gas state, but here transpiration is the water which is evaporated or away from the water can be evaporated from the leaves and the plants, and inside the plants transfer the atmospheric vapor pressure. It can be converted into atmospheric vapor pressure, is called, we call it as transpiration. Next, runoff. Runoff is the drainage basin of the streams. It is generally consists of the flow that are unaffected by the artificial diversions of the storage. Artificial diversions of the storages. Another runoff is a very big topic, and we have to calculation of the runoff. There is some of the CSCN method, soil conservation service, carbon number method. The last of methods is there for calculating the runoff. So for calculating the from the availability of data of the catchment, we have to calculate the runoff, and the use of the calculation of runoff is to estimate the hydrological structures to construct on certain area of the above. We have to calculate the runoff or rainfall data of last 100 years. We have to collect and predict the data and analyze the data and give the for the design purposes hydraulic structures. The runoff is very important. So in the runoff will be increases, the ground infiltration will be the decreases, the runoff will be the increases. The infiltration will be the more, the runoff will be the less. Why? Because the infiltration process, the above water which is inside the ground, the absorbing is more. What happens? The water which is flowing on the ground level will be automatically can be decreases. So that is the main reason we have runoff can be affected. For calculation of the runoff, where the use, as I told, the runoff is very important, and calculation, after the calculation of the runoff, we can design the hydraulic from the data, can give the hydraulic structure like the ponds, lakes, reservoirs, and whatever it is, the hydraulic structures to water availability for the purposes can be runoff only, precipitation and from to runoff only. Next, storage. The storage is nothing but this is also one of the part of precipitation, and storage places is where you have to store atmospheric at surface. We have to store storage places is oceans, lakes, reservoirs, glaciers, like lot of parts we have to storage. Underground storage also soil from the construction underground, hydraulic structures can be rocks inside them. Also some of the water layers can be also storage of the water. Next, water budget equation. Water budget equation. So water budget equation is also important. So the expression of the water budget, the catchment for the interval of the return is equal to P minus R minus G minus E minus T is equal to delta S. From you have to calculating the water budget equation. That is also P minus is equal to P precipitation, R is equal to surface runoff, and net groundwater storage. Next, very important point is, as we know about the hydrology and precipitation, forms of precipitation can be discussed in the previous. Next, here we have to discuss about the precipitation according to the types of the precipitation. Forms of precipitation is also studied, like rainfall and precipitation, dew and rain and dew, drizzle, like that. So fog, mist. So for here we have to study about the types of the precipitation. So for this one, first one is very cyclonic precipitation. Cyclonic precipitation. The second one is convective precipitation. And third one is orographic precipitation. And fourth one is precipitation due to the turbulence aspect. These are four type of the precipitation can be classified as per the research. Next, cyclonic precipitation. What is meant by very beginning one? First one is cyclonic precipitation. In the cyclonic precipitation is there cause lifting of the air mass due to the presence of the difference. We call it as cyclonic precipitation. In the cyclonic precipitation, what happens actually, the mechanism, the low pressure of the occurs in area horizontally from the surroundings of the area, causing air low pressure area is lifted. Next, cyclonic pressure may be divided into frontal precipitation and non-frontal precipitation. The cyclonic precipitation also another bifurcated into two parts. So frontal, non-frontal precipitation. So let us see in the frontal precipitation what is meant by frontal precipitation. In the frontal precipitation is there due to constructing the temperatures, densities clash to each other and condensation precipitation occurs to surface in the surface in the clouds of the in contact is called as frontal type of the precipitation. So when contact each other, this type of the contact is called frontal. Frontal is, that is the name itself, is they bombard each other in the front side. That's why we call it as frontal type of the precipitation. Next, non-frontal type precipitation. So in the cyclonic precipitation, the second one part is non-frontal type precipitation. In case non-frontal precipitation is the moist warm air masses and the stationary and moving the cold air meets to the tree. Thus the lightness of the warm air masses, there the passive ascent warm air over cold air moving and the active under the cutting. So that is called by the non-frontal precipitation. A lifted air from this higher altitude of the precipitation is occurs. So it means the case of non-frontal precipitation, the moist warm air masses is stationary. Moist air is one is stationary and the moving the cold air mass meets to that one. One is stationary one, warm one, and the cold one which is meets to that one, and again it can be forms to the precipitation due to lightness of the warm and the passiveness of the air to cold conditions, cold air condition, and it can be forms non-frontal precipitation forms. So it can be comes on the non-frontal. It is can be called as non-frontal precipitation. Next, second one is convective precipitation. Convective precipitation. So this is also just like in the previous one, but this is another one. Convective precipitation is caused by natural rising of the warmer light air, cold denser surroundings. You have to see in the diagram. So these are the cold warm of the air can be forms, can be ghost of force and cold, and again it can be forms of the precipitation is called convective type of the precipitation. Generally this kind of precipitation occurs tropics and where the hot day of the ground surfaces get heated, and again it can be heated water can be lifted the topmost, and it can be again cooled, and cool of the water comes into the takes place. This process will be continuously continue process. We call it as these type of the convective precipitation. So third one is orographic precipitation. In the orographic precipitation means here, see the orographic precipitation, the clouds, the heat clouds can be, which is air masses can be lifted in the top, and again it can be cooled, and it can be flowing some of the area for about chemical action. So in the moving of the cloud, some of the area, some obstructions will be there. In the topmost one, hilly areas, top of the mountains can be obstructed, these type of the clouds. So these obstructing of these clouds, again it can be the rainfall will be starts, and availability of precipitation will be on that one side only. Another side, why? Because the clouds will not be allow the mountains of the precipitation one side. So that the greatest amount of precipitation withdrawal from the one side, and the leeward side often very little precipitation will be available. So that is the means the whatever as shown in the green in the area, only this is the above the one, the clouds which is forming here, and it can be bombarding the topmost, and again the precipitation will be comes here only, not this here. This is all dry area. So this is type of the precipitation type, we call it as orographic precipitation. Orographic precipitation. Next, the fourth one is precipitation due to turbulence ascent. So this one is the fourth one, air mass and forces due to the greater friction at surface and a travel over the ocean. So this type of the clouds we call it as turbulent type of the ascent. This mass air bubbles can be increased turbulence and the friction where ultimately condenses and precipitation is occurs on that one. So these type of the action, these type of the process we call it as precipitation due to turbulence. And fourth one, these are the four types of the precipitation. So here we have to study up to this one, types of the precipitation and forms of the precipitation will be studied. So these are the some of the references, which is some of textbooks and web references are given due to the regarding the precipitation and types of the precipitation will be studied. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.